What if the chemical you instinctively associate with, one of the deadliest habits in human history is actually just fundamentally misunderstood?
I mean, it is a wild thought, right?
It really is. Today, we are completely tearing apart everything you thought you knew about a substance that is likely sitting in your house, your car, or like at the very least in the pocket of someone you know.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a very specific, highly provocative document excerpt. It's titled Nicotine, the Pharmacology of Addiction and the Drug Identity Crisis.
And just that title alone.
Yeah, the title alone is a massive red flag that our standard societal definitions are just, well, they're breaking down.
They really are.
We are tackling the fundamental question raised by the text, which is nicotine a drug? Now, on the surface, that sounds like a yes or no question from a middle school health class.
Right. Like something you'd answer on a multiple choice test.
Exactly. But the phrasing, calling it an identity crisis, it implies something vastly more complicated.
It really implies a total collapse in how we categorize and understand the substances we put into our bodies.
Yeah.
We're looking at a conceptual framework that challenges the very language we use.
Yeah.
I mean, the text isn't just asking about the chemical composition.
Right. It's not just basic chemistry.
No, it's asking how a single molecule has managed to completely fracture our medical, regulatory, and cultural consensus.
Okay, let's unpack this because it is genuinely bizarre that a substance this ubiquitous, something humanity has consumed for thousands of years is suffering from an identity crisis.
It is strange when you really stop and think about it.
How does something so heavily studied not have a fixed identity? I was trying to visualize this for you, the listener, and the best way to understand it is to think about a highly talented, hardworking character actor in Hollywood.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. Let's say this actor has been working for decades, but back in the 20th century, a massive studio cast them as the lead villain in a wildly successful, incredibly violent horror movie franchise.
And we'll call that franchise what? Combustible cigarettes.
Yeah, exactly. The blockbuster that just took over the world.
Very destructive blockbuster.
Right. And in this movie, the actor is surrounded by a terrifying supporting cast, tar, carbon monoxide, arsenic, formaldehyde, thousands of toxic co-stars.
The worst co-stars imaginable.
Yeah, the movie causes massive global destruction. But the public completely equates the actor with that specific role. They think the actor is the monster.
That happens all the time in pop culture.
Exactly. So now when that same actor tries to take a role in a quiet indie drama like a nicotine patch or a modern streaming series like an oral pouch, the audience still screams in terror.
Because they can't unsee the villain.
Yes, they completely misunderstand the actor's independent profile because it is entirely overshadowed by the vehicle it usually travels in.
That analogy perfectly isolates the core of the pharmacology we need to discuss today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we have a specific molecule nicotine that is inextricably linked in the public consciousness to a specific, incredibly harmful delivery method.
The combustion part.
Right. The source text demands that we separate the molecule from the combustion. We have to look at what this identity crisis actually means for medication safety.
And we have to rely strictly on the biological and pharmacological reality, right?
Right.
Like stripping away all that cultural baggage.
Exactly. Which is not easy to do.
Which is exactly why we need your expertise today. Because when the text starts throwing around terms like, the pharmacology of addiction alongside drug identity crisis, we really need to understand the actual biological mechanics.
We do, because this isn't just theory.
Right. We aren't doing a philosophical exercise here. We are talking about public health and personal safety.
Absolutely.
So let's break down the primary theme from the text regarding these misunderstood risks. Why does this identity crisis actually matter?
It matters because this drug identity crisis is directly driving a widespread, systemic failure in how the public comprehends medication risks.
So it's actively hurting people's understanding.
Yes. The text draws a direct line between the inability to accurately define nicotine and a dangerous confusion surrounding basic treatment questions and patient education. What's fascinating here is how the source material breaks down the biology to explain why this confusion exists. To understand the risk, we have to understand what the molecule is actually doing in the brain.
Right. Let's get into the actual science of it. What happens when nicotine actually enters the system?
Well, nicotine is an alkaloid. In nature, it actually evolved in the nightshade family of plants, tobacco being the most famous, obviously.
Right, tomatoes and eggplants have tiny amounts too, right?
They do. But in tobacco, it acts as a biological defense
Oh,
mechanism.
shit.
It's essentially a natural pesticide to stop insects from eating the leaves.
Wait, really? It's a pesticide?
Yeah, it binds to specific receptors in the insect's nervous system, basically overloading it.
Wow.
Now, human nervous systems are obviously much larger and more complex, but we have those exact same types of receptors.
Okay, so what are they called?
They're called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors.
Hold on. So we have receptors in our brains literally named after the substance.
We do, yeah. Because studying nicotine actually helps scientists discover how those specific neural pathways worked in the first place.
That is wild.
It is. So when a human consumes nicotine, the molecule crosses the blood-brain barrier. And this is where the delivery system becomes the most crucial variable in the entire discussion.
The vehicle, like the movie franchise.
Exactly. If you are smoking a combustible cigarette, you are utilizing one of the most efficient, highly engineered drug delivery devices ever created by human beings.
Let's pause there because I think people assume a cigarette is just, a paper tube of dried leaves.
Yeah.
But you are describing it as engineered technology.
Oh, it is absolute technology. It's been refined for over a century. When tobacco is burned, it creates an aerosol that carries the nicotine deep into the lungs.
Right into the tissue.
Straight into the alveoli, yeah, where it immediately transfers into the oxygenated blood. From there, it pumps through the left ventricle of the heart and hits the brain in roughly 10 to 20 seconds.
10 to 20 seconds. That is so fast.
It is a massive, instantaneous spike.
Yeah.
Once it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it locks directly into those acetylcholine receptors we talked about.
And what happens then?
When those receptors are activated, they trigger the release of a whole cascade of neurotransmitters. But the most important one, especially in the context of addiction, is dopamine.
Ah, dopamine.
There
The
you go.
reward chemical. The thing that tells the brain, whatever you just did, do it again.
Yeah, it floods the reward circuits. But it also releases adrenaline, which increases your heart rate and blood pressure, and serotonin, which affects your mood.
So it's doing a lot of things all at once.
It really is. It acts as both a mild stimulant and a relaxant, depending on the dose and the user's state of mind.
Yeah.
But that 10-second spike, that instantaneous rush of dopamine, that is the biological basis of the addiction.
Right, because the brain wants that reward again.
Yes. The brain quickly learns to crave that rapid spike, and when the nicotine levels drop, the brain goes into withdrawal.
What does that withdrawal look like biologically?
You get irritability, brain fog, anxiety, cravings. That is the pharmacology of addiction playing out in real time.
But the text distinguishes between the addiction and the misunderstood risks. If nicotine is massively addictive and it spikes heart rate and blood pressure, aren't the risks perfectly understood?
Well, this is where we have to separate the actor from the horror movie.
Okay, lay it out for me.
The addiction to the dopamine spike is real. The cardiovascular effects, like the vasoconstriction, the temporary rise in blood pressure, those are real pharmacological effects of nicotine itself.
Right, the actual drug.
But the text highlights that the public conflates those effects with the epidemiological devastation of smoking.
Ah, the tar,
Yeah.
the combustion.
Yes. The lung cancer, the emphysema, the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
The really scary stuff.
Exactly. Those are primarily driven by the thousands of toxins created by setting plant matter on fire and inhaling the smoke.
So it's the fire that's the real problem.
Fire changes everything. Carbon monoxide starves the heart of oxygen. Tar coats the lungs. But because the nicotine is the mechanism that keeps the user coming back to the smoke, the public views nicotine as the carcinogen.
Oh, I see. It's an identity crisis where the chemical driver of the habit is blamed for the physical damage of the delivery vehicle.
Exactly. You've got it perfectly.
But let me push back on the premise of the text here for a second.
Sure. Go ahead.
If people fundamentally misunderstand the risks, is it purely because of the pharmacology of addiction? Or is it simply because society lacks a clear, unified definition of what constitutes a drug in everyday life?
That's a great question.
Like, think about caffeine. Caffeine is an addictive stimulant that alters neurotransmitters, causes withdrawal, but we just call it a beverage. We don't call a cup of coffee a drug delivery system,
We definitely don't.
So is this identity crisis medical or is it cultural?
Looking closely at the source text, the crisis exists exactly at the collision point of both.
Both of them colliding.
Yeah. The pharmacology of addiction, the dopamine receptors, the withdrawal, that is a cold, hard biological reality. But the identity crisis itself is entirely a cultural and regulatory failure.
How so?
Historically, our regulatory bodies have really struggled to define it. Is it an agricultural product? Is it a lifestyle habit? Is it a pharmaceutical drug?
It kind of blurs all those lines.
It does. For decades, the FDA didn't regulate tobacco as a drug because it wasn't sold with therapeutic claims. I mean, it wasn't trying to cure anything.
Right. Nobody was prescribing Marlboros for a cough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was only when the legal framework shifted to recognize the manipulation of addiction that the categorization started to change.
That makes total sense. If everyday people use the word drug to mean either something illegal and dangerous that ruins your life or, something a doctor prescribes to heal an infection, nicotine doesn't neatly fit into either box.
And that definitional void is incredibly dangerous.
Why is it dangerous, practically speaking?
Because misunderstanding medication risks isn't just an abstract academic problem. It has severe real-world consequences for how you, the listener, or your loved ones navigate personal health decisions.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Think about the landscape of nicotine products today. You have combustible cigarettes, which we know are lethal.
Right, the horror movie.
Then you have e-cigarettes and vapes, which aerosolize liquid nicotine without burning plant matter.
So no combustion.
No combustion.
Legal.
Then you have oral pouches, which are absorbed through the mucosal lining of the mouth, avoiding the lungs entirely.
Like Zyn or those sorts of things.
Exactly. And you have traditional nicotine replacement therapies, like patches and gums, which provide a very slow, flat kinetic curve of nicotine.
What does a flat kinetic curve mean for the user?
It means it wards off the withdrawal without giving you that huge dopamine spike. It doesn't hit the brain in 10 seconds.
Right. The patch doesn't give you the rush, so it's much less addictive. It's the exact same chemical, but the delivery speed changes the pharmacology entirely.
Exactly. But if you are a patient operating under a flawed cultural definition, like if you believe nicotine itself is the thing causing the lung cancer, you might be terrified to use a nicotine patch to quit smoking.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you'd think the patch is just as dangerous.
Right. You might view vaping or pouches as equally deadly as combustible cigarettes because they contain the same monster actor we talked about.
The same villain.
Yeah. You end up making health decisions based on a cultural identity crisis rather than an objective evaluation of pharmacological risk. You might actually continue smoking because you mistakenly believe the alternatives are just as bad.
That is tragic. It's the danger of making choices based on historical shadows rather than objective safety data.
It really is a massive public health hurdle.
If society hasn't agreed on what to call the thing you are dealing with, you are just flying blind. You're relying on rumor, historical bias, or viral internet panics rather than actual medication safety.
And the internet panics are very real right now.
Oh, absolutely. Which perfectly sets up the structural solution that our source material introduces. The text doesn't just diagnose this massive communication breakdown, right? It points toward a specific structural requirement for reliable patient education and robust medical databases to cut through all this noise.
Yes, the source notes bring in a specific entity designed to address this exact crisis. It's called the iMedix platform.
Right, iMedix. And how does the text position them?
It is crucial that we look at how the text describes it. It is explicitly framed as an independent medical information platform. It houses a dedicated drug database and comprehensive educational resources.
Let's talk about that word, independent.
That's the most important word in that sentence.
Why does the independent nature of these platforms matter so much, especially when we are untangling the messy, highly profitable world of addiction pharmacology?
Because there's so much money involved.
Right. Let me offer an analogy to you, the listener. Relying on industry-funded data for medication safety is like asking the casino to audit your gambling habits.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
Right, they might give you a very official-looking spreadsheet, but the math is always going to be structured to keep you sitting at the blackjack table.
That is exactly the dynamic the text is warning against. When you are dealing with substances that have massive global economic footprints, whether that's big tobacco, the pharmaceutical industry creating cessation products, or the rapidly expanding vaping industry bias, is the absolute enemy of clarity.
Everyone has an angle.
Every single one of those entities has a vested interest in shaping the identity of nicotine to suit their market needs.
So the tobacco company wants it to be a harmless lifestyle choice.
Right.
The pharma company wants it to be a heavily restricted medical treatment that only they can sell to you.
Exactly.
And the vape company wants it to be seen as a disruptive tech product.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is why the text emphasizes that platforms like iMedix must be independent.
Because they don't have a horse in the race.
Right. An independent drug database isn't trying to sell you the drug, nor is it ideologically committed to, like, complete prohibition. Its sole function is to evaluate the pharmacological data objectively.
And what does that objective evaluation look like?
It looks at the pharmacokinetics, like how the body absorbs, distributes, and metabolizes and excretes the substance. It looks at the half-life.
Just the hard numbers.
Just the numbers.
Yeah.
It clearly separates the cardiovascular effects from the carcinogenic effects of combustion.
Okay, but let's be real here for a second.
Okay.
Everyone claims to be an independent database. It's a great marketing buzzword. How do we know an entity like this isn't just another industry-funded smokescreen designed to legitimize a new delivery system?
That's a very valid skepticism.
How does an actual independent platform function in the real world to solve this crisis?
It comes down to methodology and transparency. A truly independent medical database, as outlined in the ideals of the text, functions by aggregating peer-reviewed clinical data without editorializing the morality of the substance.
So they aren't wagging their finger at you.
Exactly. For example, if a user goes to an independent platform to research nicotine, the database shouldn't just say, nicotine is bad, don't use it.
Right, because that's the old cultural paradigm that got us into this mess.
Yes. Instead, it should break down the differential risks. It should explain that the LD50, the lethal dose of pure nicotine, is actually incredibly high and really difficult to reach through normal consumption.
Wait, really? It's hard to overdose on just nicotine.
Through normal consumption methods, yes. It makes you nauseous long before it kills you. The database should explain how first-pass metabolism works when you chew nicotine gum versus inhaling a vape.
So it treats the user like an adult capable of understanding science.
That's the goal.
It breaks the identity crisis by presenting the molecule in its different contexts.
Yes. It provides the necessary friction against misinformation. Because think about the doctors, too.
Right. Doctors need this information just as much as patients.
More so, sometimes. If a patient asks their doctor a treatment question about using oral nicotine pouches to stop smoking, the doctor needs a database that clearly delineates the cardiovascular risks of the pouch from the respiratory risks of the cigarette.
And without independent educational resources, that doctor might just rely on outdated cultural assumptions.
They might just say, no, all nicotine is equally bad, which is factually incorrect and harms the patient's chances of quitting combustion.
Wow. The text positions platforms like iMedix as the necessary anchors in a sea of subjective public opinion.
They really are. They are the tools required to translate complex addiction pharmacology into clear, actionable, and above all, unbiased safety data.
Because true patient education requires absolute trust, and trust requires a complete separation from the financial outcomes of the patient's choice.
Exactly. The platform must exist entirely outside of the identity crisis in order to analyze it accurately. It serves as the objective observer that finally separates the actor from the monster movie.
So we've taken this highly provocative, conceptually dense stack of source material, and we've really traced the biological and cultural architecture of the argument today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. Let's synthesize the core takeaways from today's deep dive. We started with the question, is nicotine a drug?
And the answer is so much more complicated than yes or no.
It really is. What we've discovered is that the answer has been buried underneath a massive drug identity crisis.
Right.
This crisis is driven by a profound public misunderstanding of pharmacology. Specifically, the tragic conflation of the highly addictive molecule with the highly lethal delivery system of combustible tobacco.
That is the crucial distinction to make, the molecule versus the fire.
Exactly. And to reinforce the structural solution we discussed, combating this deeply ingrained identity crisis requires rigorous, uncompromised patient education.
We cannot rely on cultural definitions of what a drug is anymore.
No, we really can't. Protecting the individual from these misunderstood risks requires a dedicated focus on medication safety awareness.
And that awareness has to be driven by a strict reliance on independent medical information platforms.
It takes objective drug databases to accurately separate the biological realities of addiction and cardiovascular impact from the massive harms of combustion.
Which is the only way to allow patients and professionals to answer pressing treatment questions with actual science.
It really highlights how fragile our understanding of the things we interact with every single day can be.
It's humbling, honestly.
It is, and how heavily we rely on the structural definitions provided to us by society. Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Oh, I'm ready for this.
We've just spent this time dissecting how something as globally recognized, heavily studied, and historically monumental as nicotine is currently suffering from a profound identity crisis.
Hiding in plain sight.
Right, hiding its true pharmacological nature behind a veil of public misunderstanding. So it forces you to look around your own life, your own morning routines, your own kitchen cabinets.
What else is in there?
Exactly. What other common everyday substances are you consuming right now? What else are we interacting with every single day that is completely misunderstood regarding its true biological mechanics, just waiting for its own identity crisis to finally be recognized?